And the reason for that in the beginning is you need people to say yes. And so if you have to offer a lot in the beginning to get some yeses and then over time kind of scale it back, I can tell you, think of a lot of, big service businesses maybe in your area, what they're willing to do for their initial customers to get traction, to get trust, to get an opportunity looks a little bit different than when it's their 1000th, right?
Down there, like, I'm not really feeling any better. I was like, Susie, you told me when you started working, you were stressed out at a 9, and last week you told me you were at a 4.
I'm like, hey, smell that, and like, again, I don't know if it's supposed to smell bad, smell good. I actually don't know, but if it like smells rancid, and they're like, yeah, see how it smells really bad? Like, this is what good oil smells like, and then they like show you the alternative. And you're like, you can notice a difference. Like that is them showing value, showing proof.
Say, good luck to the Packers this year, blah, blah, blah. The Lions are still going to win.
Welcome to the Money Medicine Podcast, where we discuss strategies to grow your healthcare business, tools to accelerate that growth, and how top practices and pharmacies are executing and winning. All right, welcome back to episode 23, podcast number 23 of the Money Medicine Podcast. As always, I'm joined by Logan Morse, the man of many titles, of which I forget every episode, pharmacist, pharmacy. I mean, just like, it's more of a what doesn't he do? He was actually just wrapping up telling me about, some home projects. There's an axe, there's a chainsaw, there's concrete. There's a lot of things going on. So he's a bag of information. But today we are going to be talking about subscription-based services and some lessons that Logan and I have learned along the way, some insights from clients and personal experiences with subscription-based services. And so if you are interested in adding that to your pharmacy or maybe enhancing that at your clinic, at your practice, we're going to be talking about some things to consider that could make it a better thing for the business and a better thing for your patients to where, everyone's winning.
Absolutely.
You ready to dive into it?
Oh, yeah.
All right, cool. So again, you might not have interest in a subscription-based service. But if you're interested in maybe a little bit more consistent revenue stream or maybe better patient engagement retention or being able to do more preventative care things at your pharmacy or, your practice or maybe a stronger relationship with your patients or maybe some scalability to your business that might be lacking with your current structure, this subscription-based service might be something that is worthwhile. And so what I encourage you to do is not to come in closed-minded because there might be aspects of this that you can apply to things that aren't a service at your pharmacy or at your practice, but there's definitely going to be some things to consider if you are interested in a subscription-based service, and there's a lot of benefits to it. So outside of those, let's get into the hows and the different steps that, Logan, what you guys are doing at your pharmacy. I know this is top of mind for you guys because you guys are looking at your loyalty program, right?
Right. Yeah, it is top of mind. One of the things that we want to utilize it for is really getting more kind of patient and customers to see the benefits of some of the services that we offer, but also utilizing some of the services that we don't get as much utilization on. So, for example, if you have something in your business that, let's say an in-body scan, maybe you're not doing that as much as you want to. You bought this machine and you're just not getting the use out of it. Throw that into your loyalty program and now you're getting some use out of it. And then somebody might say, hey, I go to Morse's pharmacy and I get this in-body scan. It tells me all these awesome things. And you start to get more utilization out of it just from word of mouth or other things, but at least you're using the stuff that you want to use. So it can be utilized for a lot of really cool things. For us is going to be more of how do we create that subscription like service, almost like Netflix, to where people want to utilize it as much as they can. But once they kind of run out of, shows to watch, quote unquote, we come out with like a new season. So we've got, so much time to really make sure patients are feeling like they're getting as much as they can out of it before we have to come out with like version 2, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely does. I think, something that's interesting about subscriptions for me is I think where it could be really helpful is to a pharmacy or to a practice that maybe feels like you have some services that independently on their own, whether it's pricing, whether it's the service, maybe it's just demand, um, aren't super interesting, but if bundled together with others, you could have a more compelling offer, right? Like using your
Yep.
in-body scan example, I might not be interested in paying $50 for an in-body scan, but if it was a part of a subscription where I pay, 10, 20, 30, 40, it could be any number really, but some monthly number that had a bunch of different things and the in-body scan was a part of that, I might be willing to, sign up for that and then use the in-body scan once or twice a year as part of my membership. And so I think if you're listening to this and you feel like you have a lot of things to offer, maybe the packaging or independently they struggle as standalone services, this could be a helpful episode in thinking of some ways that you can bundle things together to ultimately get a little bit more utilization of those services and get a little bit more patient engagement and ultimately grow the business in the process.
Right. And I
So,
think one of the pieces is really, like we said, is just defining what's in it at first. Figure out, do you want one subscription level, two subscription levels, right? There's always the standard base level, and then you have your premium level. So how do you define what's in each is a really key component, because I think sometimes we struggle to kind of say, hey, I'm just going to give you everything. And sometimes it's too much. So I've done that even in my own practices. I've tried to incorporate so many different levels. Hey, I'm going to teach you how to cook. Hey, I'm going to teach you how to work out and give you the workout plans. Hey, I'm going to, go through all your supplements. I'm going to do all these other things. And if you string yourself out too far, it's going to be a really crappy program, especially just for like patient experience. So try to really either lump them into a standard plan that's manageable, and then really have that premium plan where you might be stretching yourself out a little bit, but you're kind of pushing people to one or the other versus giving them everything all at once. So that would
yeah.
definitely be a good way to make sure that you're looking at how you're defining these plans.
Yeah, I think you bring up a couple of interesting points there, which is, you know, too many options leads to confusion and leads to a lack of direction or a lack of action. So whether it's one, two, maybe three, having a limited amount of memberships is a really good idea. I think having a premium option is a little nugget that you kind of dropped in there. I think a lot of times we make decisions for our patients or for our customers of what they're willing to spend. And the reality is that we don't know as much as we think we know, we don't. And we're often surprised where someone you would never think will spend so much more than you would have ever imagined. And the person that you think is going to spend a lot doesn't. Um, and so if you don't have a premium option, you'll never have the ability to sell at a premium price, and you don't need everyone to say yes. But if you get one or two or three yeses, or, some small percentage of, your patients that you talk to take you up on that premium option, that can significantly increase your average. And that's, there's a ton of missed opportunity there of just like never offering the premium. But I think one other nugget that you had in there with, defining your initial subscription is just making sure that you can fulfill it. And so I think Alex Ramosi says this, and I think it's actually pretty insightful, which is, when you're starting with a subscription, you're starting with some sort of service business. Don't put together an offer per se, or at least maybe I don't want to use don't, because that's maybe a little bit more like do this, don't do that. But consider not having a subscription that is super, super, super scalable. And the reason for that in the beginning is you need people to say yes. And so if you have to offer a lot in the beginning to get some yeses, and then over time kind of scale it back, I can tell you, think of a lot of big service businesses maybe in your area, what they're willing to do for their initial customers to get traction, to get trust, to get an opportunity looks a little bit different than when it's their 1000th, right? The first guy that opens up his car, automotive shop, he probably checked your oil and checked your tires and like checked the, air filtration, all these different things, because they had time on their hands and they were just looking to wow you to ultimately make you want to come back. And that's a luxury that you have in the beginning. So when you're putting together this subscription, another thing that I'd kind of wrap in there with the whole premium is like, you want to be able to fulfill it, but don't think that you have to fulfill it for 1,000 people. Like,
Right.
how do I just wow the first person, wow the second person, wow the third person? And then over time, you'll realize there might be components to your offering that aren't needed. And that allows you to maybe come down a little bit on the fulfillment, maybe even come down on price, but just we need some initial yeses, and don't skimp on your initial subscription. And that kind of leads us into, some pricing.
Yeah, pricing is going to be a tough one depending on if you're a pharmacy or if you're a integrative or functional medicine practitioner. I think in the pharmacy world, it's probably going to be a lot lower subscription charges because there's not as many services as pharmacists that we can offer, right? I can't have you come in and do ozone treatment or do high dose vitamin C treatments or all these other, treatment options that, these practitioners do have as an option. So probably going to have to be a little bit more scaled down or have like very kind of like a very basic, hey, this is just our loyalty 10% off supplements charge. You'll save 10%. It costs you $5 a month or whatever you want to set it at. And that's kind of your basic plan. And maybe your upgraded plan is if you have somebody who does do functional or integrative medicine as a pharmacist who then can offer some sort of service, whether that's a consultation or maybe doing some lab work, maybe include something like that into the program to kind of draw people into paying maybe $25, $30, $45 a month, where, you're going to offset that charge of the lab testing fee that you're going to do. Now, where this gets really interesting is I think on the integrative and functional medicine side, because like I said, you have so many different options. You can have them do the ozone therapy. You can have them do hyperbaric chambers. You can have them do in-body scans or all these other really cool things. And you can really break it apart on what they're getting. How many patient visits do they get a year? What kind of, learning are you going to have them do? A lot of cool different things that I think patients would be really interested in, especially as like group therapy. Like, hey, we're going to have 10 individuals who all have the same thing come in at once, but only if you're a part of this, subscription-based group. You have a lot of opportunities to grow that out, I think, in that field. Whereas I think with pharmacy, it's a little bit more limited, but that doesn't mean it has to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think a couple things that come to mind for me on the pricing side of things is defining it, like if you're going to bundle a lot of different services, making sure that you are defining the amount
right
that they get to utilize this service, right? So, for example, again, not to keep going back to this, beat this dead horse, but in the gym space, in the like personalized, maybe class space, if you don't determine how many classes someone gets access to at their membership, you can lose money on classes. And so the same thing with services. So an example of that, I want you guys to follow with me on a little bit of math. So let's say, for example, I'm going to use gyms because it articulates it well, and then you can take it back to your practice. So if you have a gym membership that's maybe class-based and it's a CrossFit gym, and you're undercharging and you're only charging $100 a month and it's unlimited classes. If someone goes 20 times in a month, they are paying on average $5 per class. Now, that might not be a problem depending on your class times. However, if you make the mistake of having a 6 a.m. class where you have 3 people show up and they're all on average going 20 times a month to the gym, so they're technically all paying $5 for that class, you might have an instructor that's $15, $20, $25 an hour, plus you have the cost of the gym being open, and you are technically losing money on that class. And so similarly with your services, if you give them unlimited treatment, you give them unlimited in-body scans, you give them unlimited consultations, and you didn't clearly define it, I'm not saying that you don't want very committed individuals, but if there is a committed individual, or maybe another word might be needy, you can lose money on that. And if you're not careful and you have a lot of people that are committed or needy, maybe another word, you will build yourself a very busy business, but you will not be making money on these, services and on this subscription. So another thing that to add to Logan's points about the pricing structure is making sure that you have done the math on what you're giving away. And maybe the part two to that would be is do the math. Don't assume that your competitors have, because there are a lot of businesses in your area that, hopefully you have a very different service or subscription and bundling of services. But if you assume that other businesses have done the math and there is margin in a service because you just look around and think that Dave's down the street, they're charging $150, therefore I have to charge $150. That could be a very painful lesson where you realize you have priced yourself into a corner. There's really no money. And you're going to, again, build a business where you are very busy, but you're not making any money in the process. So when it comes to pricing, like, that is not something to gloss over. That is not something to put little thought into. And I think a lot of people very quickly do a Google search or look around their market and then just automatically determine that is what they're going to charge. And by doing so, hurt themselves and contribute to some tough conversations where you have to raise prices versus getting the prices right from the beginning.
Right. Yeah, this was a difficult point for me when I was trying to figure out how to build our model out, because I want to include some testing in it. And I had to figure out what is the one test that I run the most, and then really look at that cost. And so that test, the one I run the most, is $599. So does it make sense to have that test within the subscription base? No, because I'm going to have to charge that person at least $60 a month. And I have to hope that they stay for 10 months just to pay for that test. Now, the other services that I'm probably going to get out of that test, like supplements and other things, I'm probably going to make it in a different way. So those are some things to think about. Is you may have something that may necessarily be a loss leader in that category, but you can make it up in other ways and other services that, just by getting them in the door, you can make it up. Now, I'm not suggesting to give a $600 test away for free. Just using that as an example from my own experience. And pretty much what I learned is that's not going to be a test that I'm going to put in there. It's probably going to be a cheaper test that maybe is not as thorough, but still is going to give me a lot of good information.
Yeah, definitely. So the third thing that I'd consider, and I know, Logan, you're considering this too, is and honestly, from an agency's perspective and a marketing agency's perspective, the funny thing about this, service-based, kind of subscription that you're working on in this whole episode about is, like, there's so much overlap to just, like, service-based businesses, regardless of whether this is a pharmacy or a clinic. So, like, I can resonate with a lot of this stuff as an agency owner. And this is one that we're really putting a lot of time and effort into ourselves, and kind of unpacking, and that's the onboarding process. I don't know the exact statistic, but it will hit you like a ton of bricks when you find it, and I'll try to find it at some point. But there's a very strong statistic that shows that when someone signs up for a subscription, they make a decision on continuing that subscription within, like, the first 48 hours. And so your onboarding experience is so crucial in determining the direction or the lifetime value of what that patient may or may not be. I mean, people make decisions very, very quickly of, is this going to be something that I want to continue doing? And we automatically assume that we might have a little bit more time than we do. But, I guess the data would suggest otherwise, that, if you don't wow people from the beginning, it does have an impact on their perception of a program. And so when it comes to the onboarding process, I think, some things to consider always are, how do I make this easier? How do I make this more efficient? How do I reduce the amount of friction? And those are, kind of the ways that we're personally kind of unpacking it with our onboarding process. If you're an inverse thinker, what you could do is you could say, how do I make this the most painful, terrible onboarding experience ever? And then make a list of those things and don't do those. If that makes it a little bit easier. So, things I wouldn't do are, maybe require a ton of paperwork or not talk to the patient, shortly after they sign up and ghost them for a couple weeks. I probably wouldn't, or I probably, if I never wanted them to enjoy their onboarding, I'd probably forget to send them things. I'd probably not give them any, physical resources that they could take home. I'd probably wouldn't have any level of accountability or like a welcome message or a welcome gift or things like that. Like, you could just go down that rabbit hole of what would make a terrible onboarding experience, and it'll probably lead you to some good things. That, some things that you shouldn't do, and some things that would be great in the eyes of your patient. So again, online registration forms. I know you talked about, like, you guys were looking into some secure payment processing, Logan, and like some introductory like welcome packages and some different things. But I think, like, with the introductory welcome package, like, that's a great example of like setting it off on the right foot, like having a great like initial 24, 48 hours, with an amazing like gift. And so whether you ship that to them or give them right away, I think that is a great way to attack the first 24, 48 hours of someone joining your service and making them feel really special and really welcome. And like they're ultimately in the right place, right? Like that they've found home, that they've found their people, right?
Right.
They found their solution. So I'll quit rambling. But what are you guys considering from an onboarding perspective? Or what are you guys doing?
So right now, because we haven't unveiled it yet and we haven't really pushed it out, the goal is really to have them use as little information as possible. So just generic name, phone number, email. One that's going to help us do a lot of different things that we haven't been doing is collecting emails. So that way, then we can market it out later. But from there, then they'll have their forms to fill out as far as their health information. So I can, the goal of, obviously, with me being in a pharmacy is to help out with health related concerns. So that's really like, what are your top 3 health related concerns? Because then I can be very personalized in that aspect. But most people are going to have very similar concerns. Hey, I can't sleep. Hey, I'm overweight, XYZ. I'm stressed out all the time. So the concerns are going to be pretty similar. So I'm not overly concerned with that. And then from there, that's really the main things, and a credit card on file. Those are the main things that we're going to collect. From there, they're going to get a welcome package. So one thing with subscription-based models, I almost think about it like country clubs. Like, you want to be proud that you're part of that. So you're like, oh, I'm a member over at whatever golf club. It's going to be something related back to your pharmacy, right? So, hey, I get a free supplement every single time they come out with a new private label. Or like, what makes it exclusive to the person? So how do you make it to where I want to rant about how I'm a Keystone Gold member and you're not, and why you should be? Like, you kind of want to create that for your patients or your clients. So it could be water bottles, swag of any sort, a cool t-shirt. Maybe you just send them, a why not, or I call them like why not gifts. Like, if, let's say, I was thinking about you, Chris, and how I hope Green Bay doesn't do well next year. I may send you like a little Green Bay handwritten note that, tells you like, hey, good luck to the Packers this year, blah, blah, blah. The Lions are still going to win. It's probably not going to happen, but still, they're kind of like why not gifts in a way. Like, if you think about it, why not just do it? That's kind of why it's called a why not. And so doing some things like that, making sure you're, calling them, wishing them a birthday, very simple things can go a long ways. I don't remember who said this, but a handwritten note means a lot more to most individuals than a monetary, like a small monetary gift. So those are some ways that we're kind of building the onboarding process. And so once they've signed up for ours, is they'll get that kind of instant gratification as soon as that they've paid for it. So the moment that they sign up for it, they'll pay whatever the cost is going to be. They'll get that back, boom, right in front of them. So it's probably going to have a t-shirt, a hat, a water bottle, some very small things that don't cost a whole lot. But now they're going to carry my logo everywhere that they go while they're wearing it or carrying it around. So the products that we're putting in there aren't cheap. So one of my goals is to either do like a Yeti or a Stanley or some sort of cup with our customized logo on it, because most people are going to use those cups. They're going to travel with them, and so people will see them. So yeah, that's kind of how we're rolling it out, as far as trying to make it as easy as possible, but also give that instant gratification to where people are going to tell their friends about it, so that way it continually grows.
Yeah, that makes sense. The next thing that we're thinking about from a service subscription standpoint is, and again, I resonate this one from an agency perspective, is how do we track progress? How do we show progress? And I think this is really, really important. Whether you are in the health business or you have a service business for something else, like if you've ever gone, and I'll just kind of stick on the car theme, and I don't even know much about cars, but like, when they change your oil and they kind of, dunk that stick thing in and they take it out and then they smell the oil, like if they bring it over to you and like, hey, smell that. And like, again, I don't know if it's supposed to smell bad, smell good. I actually don't know. But if it like smells rancid and they're like, yeah, see how it smells really bad? Like, this is what good oil smells like. And then they like show you the alternative. And you're like, you can notice a difference. Like, that is them showing value, showing proof. Same thing goes for like an agency. Like, we're really big on tracking, because tracking gives you confidence, tracking gives you clarity, tracking gives you a frame of reference, and then we'll give you more confidence, hopefully, if we're doing our job, to want to do more and continue to grow. So I think no different with a subscription services. How do we show value? How do we show progress? So maybe it's finding ways to remind them of their savings on their supplements, if that's a part of your package, or making sure that you're able to show the savings that they're having on services, if that's a part of their package, or track their health progress in more ways than just maybe a number on a scale, right? Like, you want to be able to show people the value that they're getting on an ongoing basis. And the more ways that you can show that value, the harder it is for people to leave, because they feel like they're having so many, they're getting so many benefits, right? Like, Costco is a great one, and one I actually was watching a YouTube video the other day talking about their subscription service. And like, I'm not saying this is the case, and like, I don't want to use a broad brush here, but like, with Costco, if you only went to Costco for food, there'd be some value. But because you go to Costco and like, you also get the best deal on your TV, or you also get the $1.50 or $1 hot dogs, or you also get like some really cheap quality, Kirkland branded, kind of clothing, or because they have some great other appliances, they can get a discount, or they have unique products that they only kind of carry, or they have, obviously the price is a matter of all this, but like, they check off a lot of boxes to where their subscriptions just grow, because if you're not just getting value on the groceries, you're getting value in all these other areas if you're shopping. So, similarly, if your patients solely judge your membership on their ability to lose weight, then that might ignore things where like their A1C or their cholesterol or their, I don't know, hemoglobin, or like all these different things, like their ferritin levels might be improving like across the board in all these different areas. But if they're only judging you on the weight on the scale, that's the only way that they are determining value, because you're not showing them other forms of value. They might not think that the cancellation is, or that the subscription is worth it, and they'll ultimately cancel. And a quote around that I think is kind of interesting is, I heard it this weekend. It was happiness equals expectations minus reality. And so, if your expectations are really high, even if you have a great reality, like you're still maybe in the negative. But if your expectations are low and your reality is even okay, like you're very happy because it's exceeding your expectations. So similarly, like we probably don't want to like promise the moon per se with our subscription, because if we do, even if it's great, but it's not as good as you're going to be able to fly next week, your health is going to be so good, you're literally going to levitate. Then you're going to, you're going to fall short of that claim. So be thoughtful around maybe the expectation setting and be thoughtful around all the different ways that it is beneficial so that you can show value in a lot of different ways and not just one. And I think that is where a lot of subscription services struggle, is they do a poor job of showing the value. And a quote from Keith Cunningham that I love on this is value perceived is value. Value that is not perceived is not value. So it's kind of like if I came over to Logan's house and I shoveled his driveway in a snowstorm, but he thought when he came home, it was just that there wasn't that much snow or that it melted. Like the same action was taken. But in one example, Logan probably wants to text me thank you. In another, he just assumes that something else caused it to happen. And so it's a different level of appreciation. It's a different level of thought. So it's value perceived that you want to have. It is not just value. You need it to be perceived, you need it to be understood, and you need to give people ways for them to understand and perceive that value.
Right. This is a really crucial point. And I agree with everything that you said. People forget where they started from. And so if you can, and I've done this ever since I first had my first patient ever tell me, well, I don't feel any better than when I started with you. And I was like, Susie, listen, you hated life. You were on the verge of like leaving your husband, blah, blah, blah. And like, look where you're at now. And she's like, well, I'm still not feeling any better. And I had no proof otherwise. I never took down any of that information. And so that caused me to now, every time I have them fill out a form, I have them label all of their symptoms, generally on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being it doesn't affect them at all. 10 is, this affects me all the time. And so I'll go back to, because after 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks, whatever happens to be, they forget how crappy they felt then and where they're at now. And they're like, I'm not really feeling any better. I was like, Susie, you told me when you started working, you were stressed out at a 9. And last week you told me you were at a 4. Mm-hmm. So, you just kind of have confirmations, or even doing like photos of individuals is really powerful. Because they may not, like you said, they may not see the change in the scale, but they may see the change in the body. And so those are a couple of really easy ways to monitor your patients. And I would argue it never hurts to collect more information than what you probably expect to collect. Even if you're not checking on some of it as frequently as other pieces of information, at least you have their starting point. And that way, if you need to check later down the line, maybe at a year or 6 months, you have the beginning. Otherwise, you're just shooting like in the dark on what were you at 6 months ago in your cholesterol numbers? You'd have no idea. So that's a really painful lesson I had to learn many years ago.
Yeah, it's so true. I can't tell you how many times. I mean, we've been on calls together, so I know you know this. Where like you don't think a client doesn't think they made a ton of progress, and then you show them the data, and it's like, oh, never mind. If you rely on just what people feel, or if you rely on just what people remember, you will be let down, and they will churn as a part of that feeling or fading memory. So make sure you get some data on that to make that a little bit easier, which kind of leads to the next point, which is utilizing some sort of HIPAA compliant telemedicine platform, some sort of tech that's going to make it a little bit easier to keep track of all these records, stay organized with all of your patients, and just get out of maybe put it another way, like get out of the spreadsheet business, get out of the note taking in a notebook with like no other frame of reference or no other functionality. Like find ways to utilize technology to make you more efficient and also make things easier for your patient. And there's a lot of examples of that. So, Logan, on the HIPAA compliant like telemedicine side, like what specifically are you guys looking for to help with your services, your programs? Like what looks good to you, or what are some things to look out for?
So, I mean, certain things to look out for is actually where you're meeting for like virtual consultations. So certain platforms are HIPAA compliant and others are not. So that's really important to know which ones are which. You know, some things that I'm looking at utilizing in the future, there are different generators that, let's say I'm having a call, a virtual call with you right now. It's actually taking all of our conversation and starting to make highlighted notes. So then at the end of that, I can send you an encrypted message that has all of those notes already pre-typed up. So I'm not sitting there afterwards the meeting and going, what did we talk about again? What did I cover? What were the main points? It's my goal with that is just to make that experience that much greater for the patient of having everything right in front of them, but also making my life significantly easier. Some other big HIPAA compliant is, if you're texting, you have to be very cautious within texting. Emailing, you have to be very cautious of emailing patients certain data. So it's probably best to have a portal for them to log in and then be able to put that data inside that portal. That's probably the safest way. And then if you have a link that, if that you have a portal link that brings them into a virtual consult, that's what I would recommend. I'd probably steer away from using things like Google Meet or Zoom, even though I believe Zoom is HIPAA compliant now. I think you've got to pay for a certain version of it.
Yeah, a certain version.
So it is something that I would be cautious of, but your safest bet is to have a platform that is encrypted, or you have to have a login into to protect that data, because just like we saw with Change Health getting hacked into, there's going to be a lot of, and I know this is going kind of on a side tangent here in a way, but you're at a lot of risk. There are people who are mining this information, who are utilizing it for whatever reasons that they want to utilize it for. And you don't want to be at risk. And if you do, we know some lawyers who are, a lawyer who was just recently on one of our episodes who maybe might be able to help you along that journey. So yeah, that's the biggest thing with HIPAA compliance. Also knowing what you can and can't have them sign for, whether it's online. So you have to make sure certain things are signed online or can't be signed online, or, have to have actual like physical evidence that they signed for it. So there's a few things in there that you have to know, but
yeah,
that's the gist of it.
Well, I think there's some good nuggets in there, especially the the signing piece that just jumps out. I forget about that little stuff, and I think probably a lot of that is glossed over or forgotten about. So yeah, just a lot to unpack with HIPAA, and a lot of questions to ask to determine the right platform or the right solution for ultimately what you're trying to build. Now, once you get the platform in place, you got the pricing figured out, you got the offer in place, etc. I think another big thing to take a look at is making sure that there are some opportunities, which we kind of talked about a little bit in the beginning, but some opportunities for them to have personalized solutions as a part of their plan. Again, there should be, kind of like in the beginning, an option for premium. But Logan also talked about kind of with testing having like one-offs that are kind of like add-ons, and making sure that there are some opportunities to have some variance and personalization maybe to the offering, because someone might get started with you, they might start making some progress, and maybe if this is like a group subscription or a group offer, they might want more from you. And if there's not opportunities throughout your subscription process to meet, which also is kind of like a form of accountability, which we'll talk about. There might be people that are looking for more, but you never have a conversation with them to find out that they do indeed want more, or you might not have solutions in place to provide more. So, as you're getting started with your plans, as you're starting to, get some, patience into your services, I think dialogue is important all the time, but I would say definitely in the beginning, getting feedback from your patients, from your subscribers, if you will, is really, really important in the beginning, and it can lead to additional business, but it could also lead to ways to enhance your current subscription, because as much as you might think you have all the answers figured out in the beginning, you'll be surprised and you'll get feedback and you'll get criticism and you'll get applause for different aspects of ultimately what you're offering, and having some um, time set aside to be able to have the personalization is a really big idea. And so again, if you're a pharmacy, there might be some personalization that ultimately leads to some additional consults. If you're a clinic or a pharmacy, there might be additional services that you can kind of roll that into. So there's kind of a couple of things to unpack there with, or kind of a couple of reasons why these one-on-ones are so valuable. I think it's kind of check-ins. I think it's feedback. I think it's upsell and kind of cross-sell opportunities. Because again, I can think of plenty of subscriptions where over time I increased, my membership, but I had opportunities to. And I can think of others where maybe if they came to me with additional offerings, I would have upgraded. Like, this is a funny one, but I'll just kind of bring it up. Like, at an apartment complex, like, you get your subscription, which is your apartment. Like, I think apartments many times do a poor job of upselling you on additional things that you might be willing to pay for. Like, it might be premium parking. It might be specifically the side of the building that is quieter. It might be you know uh, first access to new units. Like, there's a lot of different things that people care about that you don't know unless you have conversation, or you kind of bring them up. And I would just encourage that just because you get someone into a subscription, you don't just kind of set it and forget it and just assume that the membership that they're at is where they want to continue to stay at, because
Right.
there also might be opportunities where they were about to churn, but if you talk to them, you might actually be able to work them down into maybe a lower subscription, like actually downgrade. But instead of churning and going to zero, they just reduce their subscription but still stay active with you. And that's not going to happen without some kind of dialogue with your subscribers.
No, I agree. One point I want to add on there too is you can also start to figure out your winners and losers. So what certain services are people really utilizing and which ones are they not? And you can start to cut some of the, quote unquote extra fat out of your services. So it's one less thing, one that you have to deal with. And since your patients aren't super, overly utilizing it, they're not feeling like they're spending money on something that they're not using. Because for a lot of individuals, when they start to feel like they're not utilizing their services to the fullest, I feel like they start to either back off the service, or they'll either churn, or they may go up and all right, there's only 3 options that they can do. But I would argue that probably the higher percentage would be to drop the service than it is probably to go up or down. I know, I think country clubs are really good examples of different service packages and all these other things that they offer. Hey, you can play unlimited golf. You can only have 6 rounds, or you can, you get access to the pool house on these days, or you don't get any access. Like, they do a really good job of leveraging different services into their packages. And so I think the biggest thing is if you can take, what most people are looking for, and even if it's a smaller amount. So once again, like golf rounds, hey, we're going to do, you get 4 golf rounds, you get 4 patient meetings right in the year. And then maybe when you start looking at the data and seeing how many patients actually showed up to all 4 meetings, you go, wow, people only use 3 on average. So we're just going to drop that down to 3 because that's what people are using. I know that's a long way to get to that kind of point, but, making sure that you're actually not wasting too much of your time and limiting, churn, and then while still giving them that personalized approach is important.
For sure. For sure. And I think that leads right into some ways that you can take this feedback or take this communication with your patients and utilize it in a way that's going to save you time down the road. So, if you meet with your patients, you meet with your subscribers, and you're hearing consistent messages or consistent desires, maybe it's something that you add to the package as a service, or it might just be some educational content. It might be some resources. It might be some webinars that ultimately can be created one time and then leveraged over and over and over again. And so a great, again, book on this is, I think, $100 million Offers, where it talks about listing all the different things that your patient would need or could need to be successful. And then working your way through that checklist to ultimately provide a solution for each and every one of those things, to where people feel stupid saying no because you literally check off every box. And sometimes what that looks like is a PDF. Sometimes what that looks like is a 5-minute video. Sometimes it looks like, a webinar. It can look like a number of different things. And so when you have those conversations, make sure that you are documenting what the needs of your audience are. And then it might be a ton of work up front to ultimately get some of these resources created. But once you create them, if you're consistently going to be putting people into this program over and over and over again, that's something that, again, takes a ton of effort up front to get. But afterwards, it can be utilized many, many, many times. And so it's work up front, but has a lot of leverage for all the people that come after that point. So that would be a big thing that I would stress there, is like, make sure that you are utilizing these conversations to create resources for the group going forward. And I think what that means is, and if you have kind of apprehension in a way to want to create those resources, that might be a sign that you aren't maybe looking at this from a long-term perspective, or it might be maybe a gut check to look at this from more of a long time horizon. Because I personally wouldn't want to make a ton of resources and a bunch of content and a bunch of webinars if I was only going to do this, subscription for 6 months and then give up. But if I was planning on having this business and I was planning on having this service offering for hopefully years, it would make a lot more sense to kind of pour into those resources and pour into those webinars. And if you take a look at some of the amazing subscription, out there, like Netflix's vault of content didn't take them 6 months. It took them, a decade or so at this point to have all the content that they do, right? Like, pick your subscription, Costco, like, they didn't find all those brands in the last 6 months. They've been creating relationships and putting infrastructure and systems and processes to create, access to all those products, to make it such an overwhelming yes. Like, know that creating those resources is going to be similar. It might take a ton of time, but that's a good thing, because that is the difference between great services that last and a bunch of services and subscriptions that are here today, gone tomorrow. And, come back to this episode and are revisiting and trying to figure out why they weren't successful. Part of it is like, you need time.
Right. The other point I want to add on real quick is asking your current subscribers what they're looking for, because you'll start, and I'll kind of backstep here real quick. One of the, models I was introduced to was a supplement company, and what they would do is they'd send out an email to all the subscribers or anyone has bought supplements from them, and just ask them, what supplements are you looking for? Do you want it as a gummy? Do you want it as whatever? And then they got all this feedback, and then they came out with a new product for exactly what their subscribers were looking for, or at least the majority of them, right? And so you can do the same thing. Just, you may get to a point where you're like, I don't know what direction to go to or what these people want. Just ask them, send out a quick little survey, maybe give them a cool little discount code on top of it. So that way they'll actually fill it out. And then you can implement new services based on that, or new products maybe based on that. So leverage the power of the subscriber sometimes to make your life a little bit easier.
Definitely. So if you've been listening to this episode, just to give you a quick recap for you, again, defining and understanding what your subscription is going to be, determining pricing, doing some math, being thoughtful, making sure that you have a smooth onboarding experience, leveraging some technology to make it a little bit easier to onboard, to manage, to track data, to track performance, having regular one-on-one conversations, or having the ability to get feedback from your subscribers, and then taking that information to, again, apply and make the offer better, to make tweaks to the offer, and to build additional resources that serve your community for hopefully a long period of time. Again, subscriptions and a foundation of subscribers does take time. Word of mouth is an amazing thing, but you need word of mouth to be able to kick in, and word of mouth doesn't kick in immediately. It sometimes takes time. People need an opportunity to even talk about your service. So if they stay at home all day long, it might take until Thanksgiving for them to be able to, yap to their family about this amazing thing that they're doing. So just understand that time is a factor in this as well, in creating resources and building an audience and building a subscriber base. And so don't rush the process, and spend some time being thoughtful around some of the things that we just talked about.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, again, you were listening to the Money Medicine podcast number 2020 or 23. We will be back with podcast number 24 in 2024. Actually, just ever, but 24 and 24. We'll be unpacking some other insights to, again, help your pharmacy, help your practice grow, some tools. Well, I guess I'll get into it, like tools to grow your pharmacy, tools to help you grow your business, track the growth, and just all the insights that we learn from, an agency perspective and kind of an operator's perspective with Logan's, side of the deal. So again, if you found value, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends about it. We'd love to have other people on the podcast, and we will have some great guests coming up here. So again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you guys on the next one.